All right, let's talk about something that I think drives us all a little crazy. Why is it that so often we feel like we're just talking past each other? It turns out the answer might not be about who has the better facts, but about something, well, something a lot deeper. Let's get into it. You know this feeling, right? You're in a conversation, maybe it's an argument, and you're laying out all your points. You've got the data, you've built this airtight, logical case, and the other person just looks at you with a blank stare. It's like you're speaking two completely different languages. Well, there's a reason for that, and a simple shift in how we think can change absolutely everything. And boom, here it is. This is the key that really unlocks the entire puzzle. So many of our arguments aren't really about the facts on the table. They're about the invisible frame we're seeing those facts through. And that changes the problem, doesn't it? The issue isn't a lack of information, it's a fundamental clash of interpretation. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to diagnose the problem, why we're arguing about the wrong thing. Then, we'll get a handle on this huge idea of the frame. After that, we'll look at a much better question to ask, learn a practical skill called code switching, figure out the right mindset to pull it all off, and then finally, we'll see why any of this actually matters in the real world. Okay, so let's start with the problem itself. It really does feel like we're arguing about facts or logic or morality. But what if the real fight isn't about the pieces on the board, but about the invisible rules of the game itself? And this really gets to the heart of it. An idea can be perfectly sound, totally logical, but if the person you're talking to is using a different rule book, it's just going to sound like gibberish. It's like you're trying to explain why a home run is great to someone who thinks you're playing chess. Your moves just don't make any sense in their world. All right, so if the whole problem is using the wrong frame, then what in the world is a frame? Let's get a really clear definition on the table. The easiest way to think about a frame is like a pair of colored glasses. If you're wearing blue-tinted glasses, everything you see has a blue tint. If I'm wearing yellow ones, my whole world looks yellow. Now, we can both be staring at the exact same white wall, but we will argue all day about what color it is, because we're having two totally different experiences. A frame is that invisible lens of assumptions and language we're all looking through. And this shows you the effect perfectly. The exact same statement, the same piece of art, the same idea, can be seen as either total chaotic nonsense or as a brilliant, profound insight. The thing itself hasn't changed at all, only the frame we're using to make sense of it. So if we want to break this cycle of just talking past each other, shouting our facts louder isn't going to work. We have to make a really fundamental shift. We have to start by asking a completely different kind of question. Now this is a huge change in our whole posture. The old question, what does this mean? It kind of puts us in the driver's seat, right? As if meaning is something we just grab and define for ourselves. But the better question, that comes from a place of humility. It asks, okay, what are the rules of this game I'm in? What lens do I need to put on just to understand what's being said? It's a massive shift from demanding to discerning. And this right here is the golden rule for any kind of meaningful communication. You have to discern the frame before you even try to explain or interpret anything. If we rush straight to explaining without first understanding the other person's context, well, all we're really doing is just projecting our own frame onto them, and we get nowhere. Okay, so this brings us to a really practical skill. If we can learn to spot these different frames, how do we actually move between them? Well, the answer is a skill that linguists call code switching. Now, let's be really clear here. This is not about being fake. It's not about being manipulative. It's about being a disciplined translator. It's the ability to temporarily step into someone else's world, to understand their language, their assumptions, and then communicate your ideas in a way that can actually be heard inside that world. So how do we actually do it? It's basically 3 steps. First, you just have to recognize the operating assumptions. What are the unspoken rules here? Second, you translate your meaning. And I mean translate, not water it down. You find the right words and concepts within their frame to express your truth faithfully. And third, you have to always remember that no single frame, not even your own, captures all of reality. And hey, this isn't some brand new idea. Just look at the Apostle Paul. When he was talking to a Jewish audience, he'd start with their shared history, with their scriptures. But when he was talking to Greek philosophers in Athens, he quoted their poets. He never changed his core message, but he brilliantly changed his starting point to match the frame of his audience. He was code switching. It's exactly what a good diplomat does. They learn the culture before they ever try to make their case. But here's the thing, this skill isn't just about being clever with words. It actually flows from a much deeper internal posture. We can actually see this modeled in figures like Daniel and Joseph from the Hebrew Bible. What made guys like Daniel and Joseph so insightful wasn't some kind of magic power. It was their character. Look at these traits. They were receptive. They never claimed the insight as their own. They showed restraint. They didn't rush to judgment. Their goal was always truth, not personal power or gain. And it all flowed from a place of integrity and humility. So discernment really is an ordering of your perception that comes from character, not just a sharp mind. And it's so important to be clear about what discernment isn't. It is not about being suspicious all the time, hunting for hidden meanings in every little thing. It's not about seeing everything as some profound symbol. Actually, a huge part of real discernment is knowing when something doesn't have a deeper meaning and just having the wisdom to let it be. It's about patience. It's about refusing to jump to conclusions. Okay, so let's bring all this home. Let's look at a really concrete example of how changing the frame can completely change our understanding of something in the real world. Let's take a look at this ancient text, the Jewish War by the historian Josephus. For centuries, a lot of historians read it as just a straightforward military history. And honestly, they found it kind of messy. It seemed inconsistent, the timeline felt weird, and sometimes it was morally confusing. But what if military history is just the wrong frame? And here is the big reveal. The moment you switch the frame from military history to, say, a theological autopsy or a moral argument, the entire book just clicks into place. All of a sudden, you see this crystal clear pattern Josephus was pointing out, that it was internal conflict, not just the might of Rome, that led to their nation's collapse. The text wasn't a flawed history. It was a powerful, coherent warning about what happens when a nation destroys itself from within. The takeaway here is just so powerful. The text of Josephus didn't change one bit. The facts on the page are exactly the same, but by discerning the correct frame for reading it, its true, profound meaning was finally unlocked. The frame changes everything. And that brings us right back to us, to our conversations. This isn't just about winning arguments or analyzing ancient texts. It's about connection. It's about communication itself. Sometimes the most powerful, the most effective, and maybe even the most loving thing we can do for someone is not to just state our truth more loudly, but to first help them find the right frame to even be able to hear it at all. And maybe that's the thought to end on. Instead of trying to force our ideas into someone else's world, what if we focused on creating the conditions, on building the right frame for a genuine encounter with truth? That's a question worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me.